All right. Hi, Richard. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Sandra. Hello, everyone.
You can tell I don't get much social interaction because I'm like, team cheerleader, hello, welcome.
Okay. Let's see. Trying to think who doodled yes and isn't. Well, I know Bob's coming in. And Sam's going to be a few minutes late.
Hey, Paul, can you remind me, is this a regular scheduled MITSC meeting with public involved, or is this a?
Yeah, well, it is public. We called it a special meeting.
Okay,
You know,
I couldn't remember.
Yeah,
I thought
'cause
we
it's-
had discussed having a workshop specific to.
yeah, this isn't that really. I mean, that's on the agenda, you know, to talk about how to do that, but we have agenda items that we just haven't gotten to, and so the primary reason, and then there was going to be an executive session last time, but Paul wasn't on the Zoom, so you know we didn't do it. So yeah, it's not a regular meeting; it's an extra meeting, and if it doesn't end up going 2 hours, I mean that's up to you guys. But you know, I scheduled it for for 2 hours, but.
It's been a long day, but we'll see what happens.
So we got Bob.
Congratulations on the newest addition to your family, Bob.
Thank you.
So we've got 6 commissioners on. I just got a message from Paul that he's going to be a few minutes late because he's in a meeting with the chief. And Sam told me he would be a few minutes late, and drawing a blank right now on.
Got Zeke on the phone, I think.
Zeke's on there. We had a quorum of responses to the doodle poll, but I'm trying to remember who's not on here that I thought would.
Yeah, I remember John Cashwell said he wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I know, but we did have, I think, 10 that were going to be, or at least 9. Who's missing? Oh, Matt said yes.
What about Sarah?
No, Sarah said she probably couldn't do it because she's traveling and her schedule depended on the people she was traveling with. So she might show up, but I'm not expecting her to. And James, I believe, said that he could not do it. Okay, so we're still a couple short of a quorum. And Paul's going to be a few minutes late, so we're in that situation again where I guess we need to decide if we have someone, you know, conduct the meeting for the time being. We don't have a lot of preliminaries today because it's not, you know, we're not doing a financial report and we're not doing minutes and all that. So we would be doing, James is coming in. Okay, so he was able to get in, I guess.
Hi all.
There he is. Hello, James.
Hey everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you.
Hi, Jane.
Good. I didn't think, I thought you weren't going to be able to make it. So
Just piling in on a full day of Zooms otherwise, so all good.
yeah.
Did Bert ever say yes or no? Because I know he said no, and then he said yes, and then he said maybe.
Depends on the time and whether he's caught his quota.
You summed it up perfectly.
See, Bob, if he was past McQuarrie, he'd already have his quota.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, sorry, had to say it.
Okay, so we are on
Noted.
the public stream now. We are still one or two short of a quorum. we're too short of a quorum. So what's your wish in terms of whether we try to just do something preliminary or just wait here until Paul joins us and Sam, and then we'll have a quorum?
How many do you need for a quorum?
9. And we've got 7 right now. So, I guess if we don't get them, I guess we can proceed with, sort of an informal conversation, but we can't really do a meeting.
As long as we're at sort of a pause, if I can follow up on that last colloquy, is the reason that the Passamaquoddy have filled out their quota and the Penobscots haven't, is that the Penobscots have a individual allocation while the Passamaquoddy run a derby fishery. Have I got that right?
Yeah, but you can still only catch 10 pounds.
Okay.
Just saying. Let's keep the family feud going. Hey, Paul, can you maybe kind of summarize what we're going to do while we're waiting? That might kill a couple minutes.
Well, yeah, so I could just kind of quickly tell you what's on the agenda. On paper, it's a short agenda. The first thing would be to just review the agenda, and there was going to be one suggestion there. Bob had sent around that communication, I think, about from the governor about the recent developments with the Indian Child Welfare Act litigation, and the suggestion that this might be an issue that MITSC look at in terms of trying to develop some protections at the state level in case the ICWA is really gutted at the federal level. Not that we know that's going to happen, but there certainly are ongoing efforts to gut it at the federal level. So I was going to suggest in response to Bob's message about that we just add that as an agenda item to talk generally about whether that's something we want, you want me or the commission to follow up on. And then we need to decide on the executive session again, do we want to just have it at the end so that we don't have to interrupt the stream? For folks that are on the public stream, because after that, we would just come back and probably just adjourn. So right now it's the last item so it doesn't need to change. If you leave it where it is, it's the last item on the agenda.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
I would recommend we go that route. Just earlier today, I was on a Zoom meeting. I think it was a meeting as opposed to a webinar, but they immediately went into executive session and they told the public that it would be 30 minutes and it turned out to be an hour and a half. And it was frustrating and kind of rude, I think, as well to.
Yeah, I think
to do that.
I mean, I agree. That's why we have been putting it at the end of the end of the agenda. So I think that still makes sense. I just want to highlight it for you because we should make sure we get to that. And probably last time we couldn't get to it because Paul wasn't in the meeting, but last time we had set a hard deadline time, to go to the executive session. And I'm suggesting maybe we do that again. This is scheduled as a 2-hour meeting. And I guess I would suggest that we say that, by 5:30 at the latest, we move to the executive session. That would be my suggestion.
I think that's pretty reasonable.
I mean, I don't know I don't think that executive session is going to take you half an hour, but as John just said, you never know. So, and
what are the possibilities that we might not be meeting at all today because we're not going to have a quorum?
Well, we're getting Sam right now. We are, and if he'll join us, that'll be the quorum.
Who?
If Sam
Paul?
in by phone right now. And when Paul Downing joins us, that will make a quorum.
How do we know if Paul's going to join us and when?
Well, he said he'd be in within about 10 minutes of the beginning of the meeting. So it's now 9 minutes.
Hey, Paul,
Yep.
if it's helpful, in the past, MITSC has gone ahead and conducted business sort of as if there was a quorum by at least going through the issues and discussing them. And then they would save the vote for a future meeting when there is a quorum. I'm not necessarily suggesting that path today. I'm just saying that that has happened in the past. Bjorn.
Yeah, I guess I would leave that all to you collectively, but I guess I'm still working on the assumption that Paul is about to join us. So let's hope that's the case. Let me just, I guess, continue with summarizing. The first old business item on the agenda was to sort of pick up on the discussion from the motion that was passed last meeting regarding review of the settlement. And I was hoping that, we could just have some discussion about developments that have happened since then, including the state members, meeting with the governor and plus the op-ed that Jared Golden put out, and also the fact that we now have, the language of, we think the language of the omnibus bill, although it's still not officially out with an LD on it because it's being circulated for sponsors. And then the next item, which we might want to move up, I think Kevin might want to move it up, is to discuss the future meeting schedule. And there was an exchange of emails about that. So if this would be the time maybe for Kevin to suggest we move that up, if he's so inclined.
Well, I'm confused about what we're doing right now. Are we meeting right now or are we waiting? What's actually
I
happening?
was just asked to summarize what's on the agenda while we were waiting for Paul. So. But I don't think there's any reason we can't, rearrange the agenda order, so if you want to. So the next item on the draft agenda is, and I think would be a short discussion of two possible agenda items for the next meeting. One involves the Maine Broadband Coalition. A representative of the coalition had reached out to us. I sent something around on this a while back, and he was interested in coming to a meeting and talking to the commission and answering questions about the Maine Broadband Coalition. If the commission wants to put that on the next agenda, I believe he would be willing to participate regarding that program, the Broadband Coalition, and how it might benefit the tribes. And the other potential issue for the next agenda involves the Wolfton mining project. And you may recall I had sent some things around on this. At this point, I was contacted by a representative of Wolfton. I also had a subsequent discussion with someone at the Natural Resources Council, both of whom are willing to present to the commission and answer questions if the commission wants to put that, on the commission agenda for the next meeting. And then the last item on the draft agenda is the executive session, which is on a personnel matter. Not a real complicated one. So, but there is a need to go to executive session on that. Okay. Well, I'm not sure how you want to go now, because we're still one short of a quorum and we don't have the chairperson.
I mean, I think it's hard to proceed if we don't have a quorum to be able to have dialogue and then be able to make decisions. So I don't know where people want to go. I would prefer not to wait on the line until for another hour or half an hour while we try to figure this out and then wait for an executive session. I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable being patient and waiting, but it seems to me that we can't make a whole lot of progress on this agenda without a quorum present.
I'd also say, and I think I mentioned this to you, Paul, and Paul Downing in a previous email, it doesn't make any sense to me to keep having meetings without the chair.
Well,
Doesn't make any sense to me. And if the chair can't make a meeting, then let's reschedule it. And I understand it can happen occasionally, but I think it's happened like almost every time here. And there's just no point in having meetings consistently without the chair. I know he's busy and stuff comes up, but everybody's busy and stuff comes up. I rearranged my whole day today to be available for this emergency interim meeting that we had to have on the heels of the last meeting.
well, all I can say on that is, the last meeting, Paul also had a conflict at work. There was a prior meeting where the problem was his internet connection. You're right. I mean, this would be the third meeting where, for one reason or another, Paul's had problems with participating. I guess it's all up to you, but to follow up on what Kevin just said, I mean, I guess I don't see a reason that the group that is here couldn't talk about scheduling future meetings, since it seems to be a problem. And we got 8 of you, and it's been an agenda item for a while and hasn't been reached. So I would suggest that there is a proposal out there that to move to quarterly meetings. For purposes of discussion, it was put out there to have meetings in June this year, June, September, and November. And I believe the consensus was to, based on anything we know, to continue those meetings, as remote meetings. But I mean, that isn't, scheduling well, that's what the proposal was. I mean, that isn't going, waiting till June to have another meeting is going to make it difficult to address, things that are already pending with the commission. But that was the proposal, to schedule 3 more regular meetings. I guess the commission can always make a decision, or the chair can call other meetings. I mean, under the bylaws, the chair has the right to call meetings. But the proposal was to formally schedule 3 more regular meetings, June, September, and November. And I had raised the sort of related question of a retreat. And my suggestion remains that we look at September as a potential expanded meeting, call it a retreat or whatever. But last year, we would have done work planning in a retreat, but we didn't have a retreat because of COVID. So then we ended up spending large parts of 3 meetings, I believe, doing work planning. I suggest the better way to do the work plan is to plan on a retreat where some significant amount of time can be spent doing a work plan and getting that done. And it would be done earlier in the fiscal year, because we didn't get a work plan until the year was almost half over. So,
well, to get the question out there, I'll make a motion that we have a meeting in June, September, and November.
I'll second that.
Paul, are you with us now?
I'm trying to turn my video on. I apologize. Am I in?
You were in.
Okay. Apologies. Had a meeting with the chief and our incident commander for the response down here, and I was trying to break away, and they're still discussing, but I said, look, I gotta go. So I'm on my phone, on my
Okay.
computer.
Well, your entry gives, creates a quorum. So,
Right.
we weren't sure what we could do without you, but,
Well, I
know,
heard a motion and I heard a second.
yeah,
What the heck do? God, I hate this phone. Hello? Okay, I'm still there.
so the motion was to go ahead and act on the proposal to schedule 3 regular meetings for the balance of this year, June, September, and November. I believe that was the motion. So,
So we have a motion, we have a second, and we do have an actual quorum with me arriving, correct?
correct.
So all in favor, we would vote aye.
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 Anybody opposing, say nay. Hearing no objections, the motion passes.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move on. So Paul, to go back then to the agenda.
Yes, sir.
We, do you all have it? Do you want me to put it up?
Do not have it in front of me. I apologize. Again, I'm on my phone.
I think Paul went over it with us before you got on, Paul.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I wrote it down.
Okay, it's up on the screen now, I think. So, Paul, do we still want to do introductions, or should we pass on that for today?
Pass on that. Everybody knows who I am. Everybody's talked and introduced themselves, and I apologize again.
All right. Then on the agenda, on the review of the agenda, the only thing that really been brought up was to possibly add to the agenda a brief discussion about the Indian Child Welfare Act issue that Bob had flagged that was mentioned by Governor Mills.
Yes.
So the suggestion there is to just add that as something we will briefly discuss today.
Yes.
So if there's no disagreement with that. So the item on the agenda, and it's all old business, was to, was regarding the proposals to amend the settlement, update on recent developments, and to follow up on the motion that was passed on April 7th to review the settlement. I mean, I would suggest there that there have been some recent developments and that we, address those. And I guess the first one that I would ask, maybe we could address would, if one of the state commissioners wanted to talk some about, the opportunity they had to talk with Governor Mills. I guess that was last week.
Yep.
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in here if any of the other state commissioners want to weigh in. Please feel free, especially if I don't get anything as accurate as you think it should be. So I would say that the meeting itself, the governor actually reached out to us and asked for some time to participate and have some dialogue to check in on MITSC generally. I would say in many ways the discussion remained fairly high level. We didn't get into specifics around legislation, but what I heard loud and clear from the governor was a genuine interest in continuing her dialogue with the chiefs of the respective tribes. She very clearly proactively came out and said that they have been having discussions as a group, and she'd like to continue those discussions. Really, I know it's not one-on-one, but I think what she was saying is she enjoys having those conversations directly with the chiefs. And sometimes it's hard when there's attorneys on both sides. She's got attorneys, the tribes have attorneys. There's all these other people. What I heard from her is she's got this genuine desire to maintain a direct dialogue with the chiefs. We did talk about the pending legislation. Obviously, we didn't have a copy of it at the time, so hard to sort of talk in specifics and get reactions without words on paper in front of everybody. But the message that I got seemed to be that there's ongoing litigation, there's ongoing legislation, and that, you know, to the extent that MITSC can be productive and proactive on issues that aren't necessarily legislative or legal in nature. And what I didn't get the sense of is that she was trying to dissuade us from participating in those conversations, but knowing that the pendulum has sort of swung to the legislature and the governor and the tribes at this point, she seemed to believe, and I agree, that there may be things that we can do as an entity outside of that, where we can continue to be productive on issues outside of litigation and legislation. And so we talked about a variety of things, and she also made it very clear that we can only participate in those dialogues, you know, if the tribes want us to participate in those dialogues, and certainly very respectful of that. I'm just checking on my notes here. Again, it was fairly high level. I mean, I'd open it up to the other state commissioners, but I guess my biggest takeaway is that she sincerely appreciates that dialogue with the chiefs right now and wants that to continue. And to the extent that MITSC can play a role in issues outside of the legislature, she thinks that's really important.
I would just add, thanks for that, James. And I think that's great that, you know, the governor wants to maintain a direct relationship with the tribal chiefs. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's government to government. And it's head of state to head of state, so to speak. And so that's great. So thank you for that update, James. In the past, MITSC has facilitated an annual assembly of governors and chiefs, which brought together the governor and all of the tribal chiefs. Basically, it began as an effort to help MITSC shape its agenda going forward, to have everybody, you know, together, the chiefs and the governor. I think they met kind of behind closed doors with the representatives and had, you know, productive conversations, which gave MITSC some direction on what to work on. I don't know if any of that came up, James, in your discussions with Governor Mills or not, in terms of MITSC possibly playing that role.
And I would certainly look to the others as well. I mean, the sense that I got was that there are ongoing discussions between the chiefs and the governor. It sounded like she had just had one, not just a few days before we met with her. So that didn't specifically come up. I certainly didn't hear any resistance to it at all, but it seemed to me that it was happening organically on its own, and that she was looking forward to more of that interaction. And I do agree, John, on the, I think we're in a space now where this needs to be a government to government conversation. So that makes 100% sense to me.
Yeah, I think those assemblies were more for the purpose of providing some direction to MITSC as it moved forward. Kind of like getting buy-in from the governors before we went off crazy on all kinds of agenda items.
Thanks for all of that, James. Very helpful. I just say or echo or add that it was really nice to hear directly from the governor, and she was really focused on us and MITSC during that time. We spent probably over an hour and a half with her, and it was really clear that she felt MITSC was important and that she wanted to see MITSC find ways to become more active. And the challenge, I think, is really to figure out where that action should be, because as James mentioned, she was quite clear about her preference that we essentially kind of stay out of pending legislation and pending legal. So if we aren't going to go there while things are pending, then we've got to think a bit about what is it that we would do. It's funny, we've talked a lot about our charter, our legal charter, or whatever the right phrase would be. And my sense was her interpretation, which I kind of liked, was one of the loosest I'd heard. Someone else might have heard this differently, but essentially what I heard is just, can't we just roll up our sleeves and look for kind of real world street level ways to help humans who are part of these tribal communities? And so and so that really made me think, because she really didn't want us in the legislative fray or the legal fray, and kept kind of searching for, well, what are the real life practical challenges and opportunities facing these tribal communities, and can't MITSC find a way to help work on them? But it all left me thinking more about, okay, what are we going to do? How does MITSC settle into a rhythm in the year 2021 and figure out what to work on? And I'm specific about that, meaning everybody understands why MITSC was created in 1980 or what it did in 1990 or 2000. But in the year 2021, where can MITSC settle in and add real value for the tribes and the state? That, to me, is still the $64,000 question.
Trying to get this thing to turn. So I think, I guess, and I don't know if Paul touched on this at all. I think as the chairman and the director of MITSC, I don't necessarily know if I was put off, but I do think that I was left with that wonderment of, okay, you're meeting with MITSC, but you're not including any of the tribal reps, and you're not including the executive director, you're not including the chairman. So what message is that from our perspective? You know what I mean? And I'm trying to think, okay, well, it's a positive in that she's, interacting directly with the tribe on that government to government relationship. Cool. And does that mean that MITSC is more inclined, or more of a secondary mechanism that's going to, slowly go away, and then we're going to have that real, that real government to government relationship, and MITSC not necessarily be so instrumental, or I think it really just took me and caught me off guard, and I think it may have caught Paul off guard. And Paul, Thibault, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You're on mute, Paul.
I'm on mute.
I am. The other,
Yeah.
I can say that the idea of a meeting with just the state commissioners, that's been around for a while, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but I think Bob in particular was like really trying to facilitate, that happening. So,
Right.
So it wasn't I didn't take it as a slight that the governor was meeting with the state commissioners. I think we've wanted the state, the governor to have a meeting with the state commissioners. So I wouldn't take it that way. It may be that it should be the first step towards another meeting with the governor, you know, where everybody's, you know, part of that. But
Or you and I,
or not.
you and I gives for her to give us some kind of guidance on what she envisions this going forward.
I would add that, you know, I didn't get a notice from the governor's office, you know, about the meeting, and I just felt I didn't expect to be part of the meeting. I think the state members, it was high time for the state members to, you know, have a sit down, or at least a virtual one with the governor, you know, and I didn't need to be part of that, but I did think they ought to at least have given me as director, and then to you, you know, a heads up that that was happening. But
Right.
you know, I think Bob's got a comment.
Paul Downey, may I speak?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, please don't read too much into that. I think we got an email late Wednesday saying, can you all be on a phone call or a Zoom tomorrow or Friday? And if I'd thought it through farther, I probably would have let more people know that that was at least happening. The discussion within the state caucus with the governor was not sufficiently involved that, or evolved, that we would be at any point where we could sit down and bring the whole group into a meaningful discussion. But while I've got the floor, I think I did hear the governor say that she wished MITSC would be available to take on all the things that are that emerge from day to day, month to month between legislative sessions. And I think she mentioned, in no particular order, the Perry water problem, whatever land access dispute may have existed, may already have been solved in the Down East Lakes Land Trust, and a similar one in Carabasset Valley. She also added that before Donna Loring had left, that they were contemplating for the Department of Touristry, I guess, a historical or cultural trail, which reminded me that John Banks told us at our last retreat that he ranked Maine about 50th in terms of their public support of tourists and ecotourism and so on for native tribes. I'll volunteer to go to Donna Loring and see what she had developed on that, see what the governor was talking about. But she was pleading for us to be available, my phrase, a quick reaction force to deal with everything that happens.
Sounds good.
Kevin I think Kevin wants to comment.
Yeah, Paul Downing, just back to your comment. Thank you for sharing that. And I would just say too, I don't think it was intentional in any way. This was probably something that should have happened ideally 2 years ago. You know, we all, and I'm thinking about this for all 12 of us, I hadn't really thought about it before, but we all got appointed by somebody or some group. And we never really got any guidance until that meeting from person who had appointed us about what that person's kind of priorities and wishes and aspirations were. And just to hear that live was super helpful. And it made me think that it would be healthy for all of us to check back in with those who appointed us and just ask that question: what's front of mind for you, and how might we be more helpful with that which is most important to you? And as was said before, she was super respectful the entire time of the tribes, and said it over and over again, more direct tribal dialogue. So really, really interested and engaged that way. and that just as a joke, when this all came up, I had no idea, because we just had our MITSC meeting. I figured Bert and I, but particularly me, were in trouble for the motion we put through on Wednesday, that somehow someone had heard that. And now 48 hours later, I was on a conference call with the governor. I mean, I didn't know why we were there either, but it did turn into a really, really great meeting. And she really puts state tribal relations in a high priority, and it was and MITSC in a high priority. And for me, it was healthy and exciting and energizing to hear that. So I thought it was all positive.
Cool. Oh, I don't know what I did now.
Bert, further comment, Paul?
No,
Bert's got one.
Bert? You're muted.
I was unmuting. Well, hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I had issues trying to get on here. For some reason, I got select emails since I got my new phone, and not everything transferred over to my iPad either. So anyway, so listening to the conversation here, we do what we can, as far as tribal commissioners, to basically get back and forth with our chief and council, find out where we're at, so that way we can have an idea when we have our MITSC meetings. This way we don't step on any toes as well. But so I think it's good that all the state commissioners finally got a chance to speak, as Kevin mentioned, to the person that basically appointed them here in this commission. Now, as far as the conversation, in regard to MITSC's role, the way I understand it, or right now, is as if almost as if we're being asked to backpedal a little bit, just put the brakes on. I don't think that would be the appropriate thing to do. As far as with the legislation and all that kind of stuff that goes on, we still have a responsibility there, because where else are they going to go? Most of those legislators don't have a clue. We've seen that. They don't have a clue as to what the Settlement Act is about. They don't have a clue as far as MITSC's role, responsibilities. They know we exist, and pretty much that's about it. They know the Settlement Act is there, but as we found out, they have very limited information as far, because they don't do their homework, first of all, evidently. So I think that it would be important for us not to limit ourselves, and pull ourselves away from the times when legislation and all these other things are going on, because our responsibility is to see personally, and how these things are affecting the relations between the tribes and the state. So I would bring caution to that, that whole idea. I think that, yes, and I think we do keep track of, our director, lets us know when all these things are going on, and fellow commissioners let us know what's going on that maybe the rest of us have not seen or heard about. So that's important, because if we don't, then I think that we will not be doing our job in paying attention to the things that are disrupting that a positive relationship, or anyway, for now that's about it.
Paul, can I make a comment to follow up on Bert? And I think this fits in with the way the conversation has been going. I mean, the short-term issue that, before the commission relative to that conversation is, the omnibus bill is about to come out. And MITSC made the decision at the last meeting to do sort of a general review regarding the current effectiveness of the settlement, but that we've distinguished that from the specific issue of, the particular legislation and whether MITSC would take positions on that. But the draft of the omnibus bill that is going around for sponsors now incorporates, does affect MITSC in some specific ways. And there are some changes specific to MITSC, and in particular, the bill that I see as that apparently is going to emerge, it includes a lot of the language that was in LD 2118 last year, and which had significant, role for MITSC, specifically with respect to assemblies, and the assemblies that John Banks referred to. There is provision in the bill to have those kinds of assemblies, and with respect to the legislature, for MITSC to actually basically put those, convene those assemblies. And there's also provision carried over from LD 2118 for MITSC to have some role with the tribal, state consultation process that is proposed by the statute, and for MITSC to play a role in developing what is being, has been characterized as the bicentennial accord between the state and the tribes, which would periodically be, revisited and revised. There are things apparently going to be in the bill that comes out within a few days that very specifically involve MITSC, apart from the bigger issues in terms of, restoring federal Indian law and so forth. So I thought I should bring that up at this point, because apart from the general role of MITSC, I mean, I would think that when there's legislation that specifically addresses MITSC, that MITSC would continue to, be involved and would have something to say. And it's my understanding, as the last I heard, the plan was to have a public hearing on the omnibus bill on the 4th of May, which is, not very far away. So the bill apparently is going to address in some specific ways the role of MITSC, and so I think the MITSC has the sort of short-term question of, how are we going, weigh in on at least those aspects. So.
Speaking only for myself, I guess what I'd like, and I'm not sure that this is even possible, if the hearing is going to be on May 4th, which is interesting because the bill hasn't been referred to committee, so I don't know how it would have a public hearing date yet. But I guess it would be interesting to me to, before I signed on to any strategy, and I'm not opposed to any given strategy, but before we sign on and endorse a strategy, I guess it's important for me to understand what those provisions are, and then what we would say about them, and then what their context is to the broader legislation at hand. It seems like that's in the next 10 days. I'm not sure we can do that.
Right. So I'm sorry, I had a real quick phone call I had to take right in the end of what Paul Tebow was addressing. So I think I'll echo something that Bert said that kind of, good Lord. something that Bert said that kind of resonated in my head. And I think John Banks may have touched on it a little bit, is that MITSC has been that guiding force, steering mechanism, whatever, that's supposed to be that conduit between the state and the tribes. It appears Governor Mills is trying to move toward that direction. My cautionary would be, we are the subject matter experts. We have the historical referencing and stuff like that. So why would we be kind of like encouraged to not participate in legislative discussions, et cetera, if we're in fact the gatekeepers, if you will, of a lot of the knowledge that has occurred over the last 40 years. I find that it just makes, and not that there's anything, nefarious, et cetera, going on. It just makes me wonder, why would you not want that entity, that historical institutional knowledge to be available to the legislative body? It just makes me think. That's all.
Hey, Paul Downing.
Go ahead, Bert.
I've noticed Sam St. John had his yellow hand up there for quite some time.
Oh, I can't see. I'm on my phone. I can't see.
Yeah, he does.
Go ahead.
Hey, it's a good coincidence that you're talking about, everybody, or I think it might have been Paul that brought up talking about people who appointed us to this committee, because I had the opportunity right before this call to talk to both of the people that appointed me, Brian Reynolds and Clarissa. And I always try to glean when they're talking to me, how interested in what I'm saying, and they seem pretty interested in everything that was the goings on with this committee, even though like right now we're having we're in the middle of getting towards the end of a chief election, and everybody's riled up about that. But I was just wondering, was the feeling that you got from the governor, was it that the issues that she brought up that she would want MITSC to address, did you feel like that would be our main purpose going forward, or that would be in conjunction with what we're already doing? That was just a question I had.
I think to respond to your question from my perspective, the way I interpreted the discussion, she saw issues that were leadership to leadership, head of government to head of government, was one level.
Perfect.
And then issues that, or initiatives or work that could be productively handled and worked on and developed in the one and only established forum where you have members of the three nations and the state, that she sees that, I think, as great opportunity, and a forum that can produce a lot of good work, and that the tug and pull of the legal battles and of the legislative initiatives is occurring at a higher level. So that was, I think she saw a lot of rich opportunity particularly for a body that's been stabilized, at least from the state side, in terms of the state positions, was left neglected. And then she repopulated the positions and tried to put on a team that would maybe bring some energy on the state side, and has seen, I think, over the last 2 years that we have been able to establish personal connection and personal, I think, respect and relationships, that there's just great potential for us to do a lot of work. So that was the message and the perspective that I interpreted from what she said.
Thank you, Richard.
Oh, Bob, I think you're on mute.
I am so dumb. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? To your point, it has occurred to me recently that, speaking of all the years of reporting that we've been doing, it has occurred to me that it might be a good use of someone's time, and I'll volunteer to do it, to abstract from those reports the principal recommendations of the commission over the years.
Yep.
And I'm not in a position to be able to do it right now, but one of them has always been that all parties should regard the Settlement Act as subject to revision. For a long time, there was no discussion of that. Just as an example, there are other various recommendations in there, and maybe the biggest one has had to do with the saltwater fishing dispute. Am I echoing, or is that somebody else on the line? I think I'm echoing. I'll yield the floor for now.
No, you're fine. I can hear you clearly. Am I unmuted? Yeah, I can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay, well, I'll yield the floor anyway, but I'll volunteer to prepare for the rest of the commissioners a brief abstract of what it is we've been recommending that the legislature has not acted on all these years.
I'm fine with that. Paul, Tebow?
Yeah, I mean, I can work with Bob, to put that together. I mean, I guess I would just say that, I mean, yeah, I mean, there are definitely things on which MITSC has taken, consistently taken, prior position, but there are also bigger questions on which we're not going to find specific recommendations, from MITSC. So, but I can work with Bob on that.
That would be awesome. Thank you, Paul.
I mean, if I could add, and to follow up on what James said after my comment about the pending omnibus, as managing director, I need some guidance in terms of what if there's going to be a public hearing at some point. I've been told it's going to be on May 4th, although I share James's question, in terms of how we know it's going to be on May 4th when it hasn't come out yet. But at some point there's going to be a public hearing, and as managing director, historically, when MITSC has weighed in on anything that relates to MITSC, and it would be me that would be at least drafting, the proposed position that MITSC would be taking on it. So I need guidance, from the commission. And I guess I would add that, MITSC, at least through me and the chairperson, participated actively in the drafting of LD 2118 last year. And so a lot of the language that I'm referring to that's been carried over is actually language that we, some of that language is language that literally came from us.
Gotcha.
So I do need to know, between now and when they have a public hearing, I need to know what input the commission wishes us to have.
I'm not going to direct you. It's going to have to be the commissioners.
If I may jump in just for a second here, I just wanted to speak to the issue of the timing. And yes, it is a short time frame, no doubt. But I think that when it comes time to making important decisions, sometimes we have to rely on others to have done research and looked at things, and we have to trust other people that have looked at this. And I think of the task force and the work that they did and the length that they went to educate themselves about the history and about what federal recognition means versus some of the provisions of the Maine Implementing Act that have been troublesome and have caused a lot of litigation between the tribes and the state. So I certainly wouldn't have the time between now and whatever, May 4th, to do a deep dive into all of the nitty gritty details here, but I think I understand the general concepts enough and have worked in Indian affairs myself long enough to suggest that we move ahead and seriously consider supporting this legislation. You know, this was an initiative of the legislative leadership in the last session. This was not a tribal initiative initially. This was a state initiative, and it was after many years that many state officials have begun to realize some of the problems that some of the provisions of the Maine Implementing Act have created here in Maine. And I keep wanting to remind people that the tribes are very much different than we were back in 1980, having just had federal recognition for a few years and having just begun building, all of the governmental programs that most municipalities have and most, if not all, federally recognized tribes have in the rest of the country. And so thank you for the opportunity to share those thoughts.
Thank you, John. I apologize if I see chat. I have to go and look at it because it kills my screen. Sorry. And then it won't turn back, so I have to play with the phone. It's like, come on. I hate doing this through a phone, but I'll be honest with you. The internet speed here at the tribal government in Pleasant Point is horrendous. And the cell phone is broadband capable. It's the AT&T FirstNet, and we have a tower nearby. So it's smooth, and you guys actually sound like human beings and not robots. But every time Sandy chats, it has this big icon that comes up on the side, and if I touch it, then everybody goes away, and all I see is the chat. I have to turn it sideways.
Thanks.
But don't stop chatting.
Thanks for blaming that on me, Paul. And then to kind of jump in, and I apologize for interrupting, but I think that with relation to the conversation that we had at the beginning, before we actually started the meeting, this is an exact reason why we should look into this meeting with broadband that Paul T had mentioned. This is the poster child for, yes, we should make that happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say that is, that's an agenda item, further down the agenda, but it is a exhibit, it looks like. So,
something that's definitely needed here. And I mean, it's incredible. I don't know all that's going on. Can you move us along to the next agenda item, Paul? I can't see it.
Okay, if that's the desire of the commission, the next agenda item is the discussion of the two possible items to put on for the next meeting. The first of which is the Maine Broadband Coalition. We were approached by a representative of the coalition wanting to better connections with the commission, with the tribes, and he was seeking help from the commission to do that. You may recall I sent out a communication about this a while ago, and the feedback I got was basically, I was asking, he was asking if I could get him names of people at the tribes, that were already involved with, the issues, help him make connections. But the feedback I got from the commission was basically, maybe we should bring him into a meeting and we can collect, information, and then we can, relay that, and the tribal commission in particular might be able to facilitate the kinds of connections that he was seeking to have with tribes. So the issue is, right now, is just, do you want me to invite him for a presentation and a Q&A, on the Maine Broadband Coalition and how they might work with the tribes for our next meeting?
Waiting on commissioners.
Does there need to be a motion made for that? Because if there is, I'll start it.
I don't know that you actually, I think if there's a consensus, just put an agenda to enter an agenda item, or I think if the chair can just indicate, that thinks it ought to be a, agenda item, and I'll invite him to come to the next meeting.
Based on the consensus, is there anybody that's an objection to including this as an agenda item for our next, inviting this gentleman?
I don't have an objection, but I have a question.
Go for it.
And I apologize, I don't know enough about the coalition, but sometimes when I hear coalition, I hear sales pitch. And so if we're really interested, I just want to make sure that if people are looking to make a connection, particularly with the tribal communities to improve and enhance broadband, that we have the right entities that are coming to the commission, either somebody that has authority, somebody that has some ability to take action. So, and maybe the coalition does, they may very well, but if it's just to make a sales pitch to sort of sign on to I don't know, a different agenda, then I think it would be a waste of time. So if whoever can come and talk in real terms about real connectivity and real assets and really enhance delivery, particularly in the rural communities, I'm all for it.
Right. And I want to echo off of something that Richard just said. If the individual is coming to the MITSC to sell the tribes on us signing up for this broadband, I think that it needs to be more inclusive, that there is that rural partnership of state commissioners that represent these rural areas that have just as bad, if not worse, internet than we do. So as long as it's more of a comprehensive approach rather than a targeted approach, I think I'm going to echo what Richard said, and I think I'm more for that style of presentation than just a targeted to strictly tribes. Unless I'm misunderstanding what I'm hearing, Paul Tebow.
I should comment. I think Bert's got a comment. But...
Go ahead, Bert.
Personally, I think that I don't think this is the place for it, because, the tribes actually, if they want to contact the tribes have certain people they can contact. If, we do have a number, if our tribal, secretary or tribal clerk could actually point them in the right direction as to who they would discuss that kind of service to. But for us to listen to basically it'd be a sales pitch.
Can I comment? I don't have any information that indicates this is a commercial entity that's making a sales pitch. My understanding was this is an organization which is trying to promote statewide, particularly in the rural areas, better internet service. And
I understand that.
And the representative was reaching out to us as a way to try to help connect with the tribes as part of that effort.
I'm sorry,
A lot
Paul.
about the Maine Broadband Coalition, but it's not my impression that they're a
Paul, right
commercial
now, I have-
entity that's selling something.
Right now. Well, I have the screen right now, I guess, but you know, it still sounds like a sales pitch, and I understand where you're going with it. But what I'm saying is that the tribes have people to contact. I mean, if it's going to be in rural areas, I think it would be more than just the tribes. You know, they would have to be going to, you know, all those different rural areas to, you know, also give their presentation. Now, for us to have someone come in front of MITSC, I mean, we have a job. You know, we have a particular type of job, and it doesn't involve something like that unless it's detrimental to the relations between the tribes and the state, right? So I think that the conversation that needs to be had would be, you know, put them in touch with the tribal, you know, different tribal governments. You know, we have, you know, each one has their numbers, and you know, there's certain people that each community has to handle those particular things. Okay, when you're talking about broadband, you're probably going to be involving the tribal public works, but it's also going to involve tribal council. And for you know, for me being a commissioner for Penobscot Nation, I'm not going to, I can't sit, you know, go over and say, chief, you know, or you know, any of our council members and say, hey, you know, we had this presentation with MITSC, and we think, you know, maybe you should look at this. That's not our job. I'm sorry.
Sandy?
What, Paul?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to say something. I saw the message.
Well, I think that, you know, this is an issue. Right now, there's a ton of money out there to assist with expanding broadband capacity. Okay. So there's all kinds of infrastructure money to establish a broadband connection, particularly in rural areas in which most of our tribal communities are. And unfortunately, in that same vein, a lot of our tribal communities lack the infrastructure to be able to apply for grants to assist with infrastructure. So my sense would be that as the representative for Zipayik, it is almost a gift that I could give back to my entire community to have this meeting, to hear what they have to say, to learn more, to network, to maybe establish a link with how I can assist within my local community to help make this happen. Our tribal chiefs, who unfortunately are overburdened at any given day, have been more so since March 16th of 2020. So I understand what you're saying, Bert. However, I don't think that we're being expected to meet with them and sign on some dotted line. What we can do is we can meet and we can take notes, and then it's our obligation as tribal commissioners to go back to our tribal chiefs and say, we had this conversation. Here is what is going on with broadband. Here is how you apply for funds to make it happen. Here's what the cost is going to be, because I think that that's part of my role. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. So any other discussion items on whether we want to put this as an agenda item or not?
No, I support it as an agenda item.
Okay. And I think that we, John Banks, I don't know if you're still on.
Yeah, I am. I've been listening to the conversation here, and I'm somewhat ambivalent to the question of whether or not we should have this as an agenda item.
Right.
I'm trying to understand the connection, if there's one, between what MITSC's, mission and charge is and this item, and I just haven't made that connection yet. And I do feel also that if this is some sort of a sales pitch and a way for broadband companies to try to get some business through the tribes, then that this would be the improper way to do that, and we should be dealing directly with the tribes. But if it's a presentation that would kind of explain the bigger picture of the overall plans for broadband expansion throughout the region, that would benefit everybody. It's clear that we're most likely going to be living in a digital world for the foreseeable future here. So it may be an important thing for tribes to learn about. I guess I could support it if it doesn't take up too much of our time.
Right. I took a quick look at what Sandy provided. Moving from location, I had to get out of the building. They're getting ready to lock it up. So I just wanted to see kind of specific entity. It looks like, it doesn't look like a commercial entity. It looks like a coalition of both government, public, private sector, education. And I think it, at least me looking at it, just a real quick 10,000 foot, screen through, it's more of an informational that we could deliver back to the tribal members and anybody that doesn't live in one of these rural areas. And I've seen it as like literally on the edge of Bangor. If you go a certain distance from Bangor, you start to lose cell coverage. And then the high-speed internet that everybody else talks about may or may not be there. So I understand the intent, and I'd like to include it as an agenda item. And if it ends up being a sales pitch, then we got Paul Tebow and his masterful skill set. He can cut him off at the knees and move on to the next agenda item.
So,
Yeah, I agree with that. Not the part about cutting off at the knees, but the first part of it. And I'm thinking that I think it would be a good idea just to have that information, and that to address the concern about not working directly with the tribes, perhaps since it's a public meeting, the tribes could invite their utility folks to sit in on the meeting and listen in on that session.
I love the way your mind works, John.
That's a scary thought.
So Paul, we're good with that. We'll add it to the next agenda. Invite them.
okay. I'll be mindful of the concerns about, making sure it's not a pitch. The other piece of this item is whether to put a present or discussion of the Wolfton mining project on the next agenda. I was contacted by a representative of the company. Based on responses from the commission, I reached out to the Natural Resources Council. And there's someone there who also, who would present to the commission if you want this project to be an agenda item. That's what we need to know, is whether you want to put it on the agenda.
I think
I was cutting in and out. Go ahead.
I think part of the backstory is that request came to the commission following a webinar in which Penobscot Nation water quality program people spoke about their concerns on the impacts to water quality and fish habitat and wildlife habitat in the region. And so I suspect that that's the reason that they have approached the commission. I just thought I'd provide that background.
Sorry. So Paul Tebow, Paul Downing. I was cutting in and out, and something to do with my Bluetooth connection with my truck. I finally shut it off. I thought after reading John's response, and the general template or the general temperature of the response, that we weren't going to include Wolfton, that we were going to invite the John, help me, EPA or somebody, as to why that this would not be a good thing for the environment.
I think I had mentioned the NRCM. They're one of the lead NGOs in the state that's taken a position that is in line with the Penobscot Nation's position.
Yeah, if I could add, yes, and pursuant to that suggestion, I contacted the Natural Resources Council of Maine and had a conversation, and there is a representative of that entity that is interested in presenting if the commission chooses to put it on, put this on the agenda. As far as Wolfton goes, they contacted me a second time more recently, so basically renewed the request.
Yeah, personally, I think it wouldn't hurt just to get educated, just purely educational presentations, if it does become more of an issue later on down the road, and could potentially implicate the work that this commission does.
I agree with John.
Implicates the wrong word.
So is there a consensus to just put it on as an agenda item and let them, make short presentations and be available to answer questions?
So moved. And maybe I would just tack on, we've spent 20 minutes talking about agenda items, and I would say we should give deference to the chair and the director unless it's an extremely controversial topic to put agenda items on the agenda.
Well,
See, this is Paul. I asked that same question when I first found the article. I asked, what is the normal process to putting an agenda item on? And I was told 4 months ago or 5 months ago, when I found this in November, that the chair traditionally did not add agenda items, that one of the state commissioners or tribal commissioners would request it, and then we would address it in this fashion. So I think I'm just following the rules that I was told. And if the commission as a whole wants to see that change, then I think that's a discussion for another time too. Is that fair?
If I could comment on that.
A point of order, there's a motion on the floor, which I would second. Sorry. I couldn't help it.
So we have a motion, we have a second, and do we have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any dissension, please let us know now. Hearing none, Paul Tebow.
Oh, James dissented. Yeah.
No, I didn't dissent the motion.
James made the motion and I seconded it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Dang it. That's what I thought I heard too.
Okay. I thought James was indicating a no vote on the motion. That's all.
No, he just made a point of order, if I'm not mistaken, of just that his recommendation moving forward.
Okay. Then the only other item before going to executive session is the one that was added in terms of potentially following up on the Indian Child Welfare Act issue that Bob had brought to our attention, that came out of the meeting with the governor, and perhaps Bob would be willing to speak briefly about that.
Yeah, I'll go more deeply into this if you want, but in a nutshell, I think you all know the Indian Child Welfare Act preferences Native families in the placement of foster and adoption children of Native children. There's a case pending in the federal courts that started in Texas, and it's now worked its way up to that Court of Appeals, the Fifth Circuit. And you all know this phrase now, it's gone to rehearing en banc, where there's 16 judges split 8-8. And depending on who you ask, the decision may or may not have invalidated part or all of the Indian Child Welfare Act. The decision is stayed basically until June. And there's a 90-day window in which parties can appeal to the US Supreme Court. Although it certainly makes me nervous, I don't think we need to act on it just yet until we find out whether it does go to the Supreme Court or not. And if the act is in jeopardy, probably the solution is state legislation. And I'll keep you all posted as anything happens. If anybody has questions, please feel free to contact me separately if you want.
Paul, can I add something?
Yes, please.
Just to follow up, I guess I would add that, first of all, that there are several states that have enacted, their own state in ICWAs, Minnesota, Wisconsin in particular, are two that I'm familiar with. I guess I would just suggest this issue's been around for a while, and there are continuing efforts to, attacking the provisions of the Indian Child Welfare Act. And I don't know what's going to happen next with this case. I'm not sure anybody does, but I don't think there's any reason to think that the efforts to undermine the act are going to end. And I think the question of whether Maine, and as I hear it, the governor is raising that same question, as whether there's steps Maine might take to try to preserve at the state level protections that may be struck down. And some states already have taken those actions. And so I guess I'm just looking for guidance on whether we just do a wait and see approach, as Bob was just saying, or whether this is something that we ought to add to the work plan, at least as an item on the work plan, and that I, should, working with Bob or otherwise, do some follow-up to see what the options might be in terms of, actions at the state level in conjunction with, in collaboration with organizations like, Wabanaki Reach and the tribal, child welfare agencies and the state, child welfare, in terms of whether there's a role for us to play. I mean, the governor's, as I understand it, the governor's suggesting it. So I'm just asking if you want me to spend some time with Bob following up on this.
I think it's a great idea. And I think that regardless of what they do at the national level, if the governor of this state is agreeable to looking at the potential Indian Child Welfare Act enactment of our own state, then yeah, definitely let's get a little bit more information between Paul Tebow and Bob. That's just my recommendation.
Then
We're a committee.
okay, and I'll take that as basically to tack that onto the work plan as, one more item on the work plan to follow up. So that brings us to going to executive session. And it's a personnel matter. I'm the only employee, so I wouldn't be participating in the executive session. I'll need to notify Dylan, who's controlling the stream, to turn off the public stream. It's my understanding that the only item after that will be to say you've come out of that. And then I assume there's going to, the meeting is going to be adjourned. So members of the public probably aren't going to want to hang around once this, because the stream will be, you'll have to put the stream back on in order to conclude the meeting, but it doesn't sound like there'll be any substantive actions after that. So, so if you're ready to go to executive session, I'm going to let Dylan know that the public stream should
We
be.
need, we need to
Correct.
make a motion.
I think that's required. So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have a second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any dissension, please say so now. All right, so we're so moved that we are going into executive session, and Dylan, execute whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I need to text. I'll need to text him because he's in another meeting at the same time.
Oh,
Okay.
well, what do they call that? Multitasker? I can't do that. That's why I'm not driving, just sitting.
So I need someone to do a tap dance or something while I contact Dylan.
We'll contact Dylan.
I'm doing that.
Oh, Chigwaha, Bert, that was entertaining. Lewin?
I have a couple girls who do all that tap. So I watch closely. Now I can bust a move while I'm sitting down.
Are you catching fish?
Eels.
Well, are you catching eels?
We're trying. It slowed down there for a little bit, and then dealing with someone cutting the cod in. That doesn't help matters. We happen to have the net and probably the prime spot, so I guess they figured they had a bunch of eels in that cod in, so they figured they'd cut it open and put their dip net in there.
Whoa, isn't that like a federal offense or something?
It is.
Now it's misdemeanor. It's no big deal. Well, they just appreciate you doing all the work and setting it up for them, Bert.
Oh yeah. Well, usually I stand armed watch over our nets, but that I figured that we can get away from that since they changed a lot of the rules and stuff like that. But
oh, it's crazy what greed will do to people.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. How do we know when we're an executive?
The screen is still indicating the stream is live. I'm gonna mute myself here and try calling Dylan because I texted him, but the stream is still on.
Gotcha. So as we're tap dancing, James, if I could get you.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you made a comment and I wanted to explore it just a little bit. And I know Paul jumped on there, John cut me off. But I don't know because I'm new and like many of the commissioners on here are new. I wanted to just add agenda items and we get the agenda in enough time where if somebody objects, I thought that they could strike through it and say, yeah, we're not going to address this, or this is not our lane, whatever. But I was told that the traditionally, the commissioners, tribal or state, make the motion or make the suggestion, and then Paul would put it on to the agenda. So I don't know the full process, and maybe that's something that we can explore a little bit more. What's your thought?
I'll defer for a minute. I see Bert's raising his hand, and then I'm happy to weigh in.
I wasn't asking Bert.
My understanding is that you can put as a chair, you can put an item on the agenda. You probably call a couple commissioners, find out if we should. But I think the idea, or the rule, or whatever, the protocol for something, something else to just be put on there is if a commissioner steps forward and requests that this be placed on the agenda, that's usually when an item is on the agenda. But you as a chair, you're also, you know, the voting party. But there's things that you may see. I don't see a problem with it. John Banks might be able to correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking, but I believe that's how we do it. The chair, I believe, if you feel that there's something that needs to be on the agenda, but if otherwise, if one of the commissioners